So, anti-Semitism all over the place. I was so naive. I didn't think this was a problem, but it's a huge one. And it's being driven in part, especially on campus, by the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement. You've heard about that, DEI, right? It's everywhere. Everything DEI must be good, right? Wrong. We go to De Anza College. It's a small school in Northern California, and a wild episode of, well, you name it, reverse discrimination and anti-Semitism fueled by DEI. A special piece in today's New York Post by Tabia Lee. I was a DEI director, and DEI drives campus anti-Semitism. Tabia Lee joins us. She was the DEI director at that college. She is no longer. She was fired, but we suspect we know the answer why, and so does she. Tabia, welcome. Great piece. How are you?
Thank you, Greg. I'm happy to be here.
So let me ask you first. You were hired as a DEI director, diversity, equity, and inclusion director. What was your objective at that school? What did you want to do?
So, Greg, speaking back on De Anza times, which it seems so long ago now, it's been since June that I was released from there. I was hired as a faculty director for an Office of Equity, Social Justice, and Multicultural Education. And what I wanted to do was what they hired me to do, which was to lead a campus-wide transformation around the topics of equity, social justice, and multicultural education. But what I came to see, Greg, is that there was a different operating definition of social justice. I was working more from what I call a classical social justice perspective. And at De Anza College, there were a few loud but vocal individuals who were working from a critical social justice perspective. And it's that critical social justice perspective that we see as the default in so many of our California community colleges and throughout the nation. And it is what's fueling the anti-Semitism that we see, on our private and public universities.
You use the word critical and critical race theory, critical, like if in this context, and I've never actually boiled it down, how does critical change the equation, that word? What does it mean in this context?
Yes. So a critical social justice approach is very different from a classical one. Most of us, when we think of social justice, we're thinking of the classical social justice approach. That's where we talk about human agency and free will and equality of opportunity. But a critical social justice approach is one that really centers the check boxes of identity around race and gender. It pits all of us against one another and puts us into these boxes of either being oppressors or oppressed, or victims or oppressors. And it really does focus on a lot of anti-whiteness. They focus on this version of white supremacy that's not like what we usually think of. Most of us, when we hear white supremacy, we think of, the KKK and white National Socialists, right? That's been the common definition, but these people are talking about something completely different. They're talking about personality qualities and characteristics, things like being on time, being objective, looking at the written word, setting an agenda for meetings. All of those things are considered white supremacy to the critical social justice ideologues. And it's so sad to see how they're influencing our students, how they're influencing our communities, and how this perspective has been pushed through and gotten so much traction with so many colleges and universities, and even our civic organizations and houses of worship at this time.
So you're there, you're trying to do the right thing, and then it seems like you're confronted with the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish kind of mentality that goes part and parcel with this. Tell us what you observed, and were you surprised?
I was very surprised. We had folks coming to our campus and saying they really wanted us to work on, the hostile environment for Jewish students, faculty, and staff. And when I took that back to my staff and my supervising dean, and I said, we should really do something about this, they told me that they were not interested in doing that. They said that, Jewish people were white oppressors and that they were focused on decentering whiteness, and I should be focused on that too. And that's when I really realized there was a strong difference between our approaches to this topic. And it's not just at, that school or in that district, but at so many schools and universities. We've seen people dancing in the streets in these past few weeks. These are activists. We've seen our medical students having die-ins, laying on the ground, and supporting in support of Palestine and Hamas. And so that's so terrifying to me as a teacher, as an educator.
It's so disheartening and sad. However, just seeing you and hearing you, I'm somehow full of hope. Really, I know you left the ANZA. Where are you now? You're do no harm, and are you? Tell us a little bit about that. And you're waging a lawsuit or thinking about it?
Yes, so I'm really excited about my work as a senior fellow with Do No Harm Medicine. They're really seeking to raise awareness about the toxic ideologies that are infusing our medical schools and our medical professionals. These individuals, our medical students, they take an oath to do no harm, but yet we see these chapters in over 100 public and private colleges and universities here in America, where they are having chapters of a group called White Coats for Black Lives. And they've put out statements condemning Israel, saying that they stand for Palestine and supporting Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. Really just how can we entrust? These are our future medical professionals. How can a Jewish person ever feel safe are, going to see a medical professional who may hold these ideologies? And
Sure.
this is what's being celebrated on the campuses. This is what their advisors are telling them is the right thing to do. And I'm just so concerned for that, because how do you do no harm yet celebrate the massacre of, thousands of people and, the taking of hostages? That's why I'm wearing my blue ribbon, to raise awareness about the hostages who still have not come home. And it's so important for us to stand with our ally. And I'm so saddened to see what are being called protests, but they're actual celebrations. And they're saying statements and chants that are typical of these critical social justice ideologues, like from the river to the sea and
Sure.
free Palestine and so forth. It's so saddening, Greg.
Tabia, as we say goodbye, I want to show you something. DEI, a friend of mine pointed this out. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? That sounds great. But the initials, DEI, and they showed me how this is the root for day or deus, or the Latin word for, yes, God. And it seems like diversity, equity, and inclusion somehow, in and of itself, is to be worshipped and pushed at all costs, and this is somehow the new altar. Forgive me, but does that resonate with you?
It deeply concerns me. I'm a secular educator, and I'm all for different perspectives and multiple perspectives, but this definitely has a religious flair to it that's deeply concerning. And I think our legislators and our public officials and our boards of trustees for these public universities in particular need to take a look at that and tamp down on it and get these programs out of our schools.
Please check out, there's more of Dr. Tabia Lee at her website, drtlee, L-E-E, drtlee, L-E-E.com, and Dr. Tabia Lee at Do No Harm. Thank you very much, and good luck in your fight.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.